right. Good morning and hello, and welcome to the 55th installment of the Seattle Metro Chamber's Executive Speaker Series. If this is your first one of these, the purpose of these events is to highlight the different industries that are vital to our region. So currently, as we are progressing through the phases of reopening and different industries are dealing with the results of the pandemic, we're looking specifically through the lens of economic recovery. So today, our panel will discuss how the aviation industry in our region is managing through the pandemic. So we'll hear about the current realities of keeping travelers safe. We'll also hear about the ripple effects that a downturn in travel is having on manufacturers and suppliers throughout the industry. So it really will be arranged today. Before we get going, I do want to share a couple of webinar logistics with you. If you need assistance during the webinar, your audio is weird, anything like that, just use the chat box down at the bottom and I'll be able to assist you. If you have questions for our panelists, we do have some time saved at the end for Q&A. So please use the Q&A box, not the chat box. The Q&A, it's a lot easier to see and keep those organized so that we don't miss any of your questions. And just to note that it will be recorded, today's session, and I'll post it on the event page later today. So if you want to go back and check anything that our speakers said, you can find it there. So we wouldn't be here without the support of our sponsors. So we want to thank our presenting sponsors, Advanced Professionals Insurance and Benefit Solutions, and the Business Health Trust, and our event sponsor today, Bank of America. So I would like to start us off by welcoming Shannon Spencer, who's here on behalf of Advanced Professionals and BHT, to share a few words with us.
Great, thanks. Like she said, my name is Shannon Spencer. I'm the Training and Events Manager for Advanced Professionals Insurance and Benefit Solutions, which is the wholesale benefits division of ABD Insurance and Financial Services. We help trade groups and other associations, such as the Seattle Chamber, provide health insurance and other employee benefits to small to mid-sized companies throughout the state. And as a sponsor, I'm here today representing the Seattle Chamber's program, the Business Health Trust, which you mentioned, and then that offers medical, dental, vision, and life insurance to chamber members. Because we negotiate these benefits at a wholesale level, you could kind of think of this like Costco. We are able to offer businesses with between 2 to 199 employees with the types of prices and insurance plans that are more comparable to what a large company would have access to. This gives our region's smaller companies additional negotiating power when they're trying to hire in our competitive job market. My role here is to connect you with our services and make sure you are aware of the employee benefits available to you through the trust and your membership. Again, my name is Shannon Spencer, and I'm the Training Manager for Advanced Professionals Insurance Benefit Solutions. And I'm representing the Business Health Trust today, which offers employee benefits to small to mid-sized companies that are members of the Seattle Chamber. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you, Shannon. So let's get going. I will introduce our moderator, and then he'll introduce our panel, and we'll have a very interesting conversation. So our moderator today is Alex Peach. He is the Associate Vice President for Corporate Relations at Washington State University. In this position, he leads the university's Office of Corporate Relations, which serves as a system-wide facilitator and coordinator of educational, research, business, and philanthropic partnerships with private companies and their industries. Prior to coming to WSU, Peach was the director of the Office of Aerospace for the state of Washington, serving as the principal advisor to Governors Jay Inslee and Christine Gregoire on aerospace-related issues and coordinating activities and promote growth of the industry throughout the state. In this capacity, he worked with stakeholders across the state to develop and implement Washington's first ever statewide aerospace industry strategy, and was the principal architect of the state's successful effort to secure production of the Boeing 777X. So with that, I welcome Alex to start our discussion today. Thank you so much for moderating.
Thanks for having me, Lee, and thanks to the Chamber for hosting this really important topic. As we all know, the aerospace industry is such an important segment of our economy. The jobs that Boeing and its suppliers create for Washingtonians across the state is so tremendous. And then, of course, you know, the rest of the economy relies on air travel to get around the world. I certainly rely on it to get around the state to WSU's 5 physical campuses throughout Washington. It is crazy to think about this year that we've had. And, you mentioned the 777X and the work that we did there. Who would have thought, when Washington won that work and the program was, when the first planes were out being tested, doing flight tests, that we'd be in a position now wondering what the market for that airplane will even look like in the years to come. So I think this topic is extremely timely, and I'm honored to be able to moderate a really esteemed panel that we have gathered for you, representing all of the segments of the aviation and aerospace industry, at least on the commercial side. And I'll start by introducing our folks, and I'll introduce all 3 of them and then give them a chance and a heads up. Emily, I'm probably going to start with you to give a little update on your organizations and where things stand for you all in the face of the current pandemic and climate that we're in. But first, let me introduce folks. So Tony Gonchar is Delta Airlines Vice President for Seattle. He's charged with developing and driving Delta's key strategic objectives for Seattle and the Pacific Northwest, including financial performance, marketing, commercial sales, sponsorships, community relations, and the customer experience at SeaTac. He is also involved in Delta's state and local government affairs. A travel executive with more than 30 years of experience, Tony joined Delta in 2014 as the Director of Global Sales, responsible for all corporate and agency national accounts in Seattle, Delta's fastest growing hub. We'll be interested to hear if that's still the case. And Tony's stewardship of Delta's corporate and agency portfolio led to industry-leading share performance gains during his tenure. Welcome, Tony, and thanks for joining us. Lance Little is the Managing Director for Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. Before joining the port, Lance was Chief Operating Officer for Houston's 3 airports and the Assistant General Manager at Hartsfield-Jackson. A growth-oriented executive, he has led strategic development efforts of $5 billion at Houston airports and played a key role in the $6 billion development in Atlanta. Currently, he leads multi-billion-dollar terminal revitalization program at SeaTac, including an international arrivals facility, renovating the north and south satellites, and upgrading the baggage handling system, all things we hope to be able to use soon. In 2017, he was elected as the Board of Directors of Airports Council International. Lance holds a bachelor's BS in physics and computer science and a master's degree in management information systems. And finally, welcome, Lance. Thank you for joining us. And then finally, Emily is the President and CEO of the Aerospace Futures Alliance, Washington State's trade association for aerospace policy. Previously, Emily led aerospace business attraction with Greater Seattle Partners and economic policy with the Puget Sound Regional Council. She's an experienced coalition builder and organized the governor's statewide council working to strengthen Washington's aerospace industry. Prior, Emily served Washington communities for 4 years as a staffer for Senator Cantwell. She holds a bachelor's degree in both political science and law, societies, and justice from the University of Washington, and was a 2019 Henry M. Jackson Foundation Leadership Fellow. Great to see you, Emily. And full disclosure for everyone, I serve on the Aerospace Futures Alliance board and was really pleased to be on the panel that brought Emily to that position and hired her. So Emily, thanks for joining us. As I said, why don't you start out sort of where the airplane industry starts, the planes that get built. We know this is a super challenging time. It's a perfect storm for Boeing. On top of the 737 MAX crisis, we've had the pandemic and now challenges with the 787. And the trickle down to the supply chain is potentially even more devastating for those smaller employers. So what are you hearing from your members?
Yeah, thanks, Alex. So first of all, I just have to say thank you for your leadership on the AFA board and that of Washington State University. And thanks for the job. Came up on a year here back in mid-August, and certainly not the year that we were all expecting. We, in my hiring process, had grand plans for new technologies and workforce projects and how the state in the different legislative sessions coming up could help boost all of our favorite issues. And then ended our first legislative session talking about B&O tax rate increase for our airlines in order to comply with international WTO conversations. So I didn't expect my first time in the legislature to be asking for a raise on business taxes for our community, but needed to do so in order to protect future opportunities for aircraft sales internationally. Had that last session end, I think it was March 9th. It was the last time I think I was around more than 5 to 10 people at one time. And then my first call as the leader of this organization related to COVID was on March 14th. And I think that first call was really eye-opening on who was impacted directly and financially by COVID concerns. And it was actually a small startup that sells a type of software for airlines in order to help recalculate and redirect air travel around weather patterns, wildfires right now. That was also very environmentally friendly because it would calculate your jet fuel burn savings based on that new route rather than playing a guessing game and trying to figure out what weather looked like in the next hour or so. So that was the first call I got because the airlines immediately looked at their books and said, uh-oh, people might not be flying very much in the next couple of months. What are the experimental or innovative contracts we had that are not essential to operations and essential to keeping people safe? So that was the first call I got. And then after we heard of potential closure of businesses due to if they were essential or not. It was a time of uncertainty of would you be able to keep your production floor opening? What are even the rates of product that need to be developed? What is demand going to look like in the next 6 month scenario? And then of course, top of mind for everyone was how do we keep our workers safe? So all of this was really thrown on to the aerospace industry, I think, first. As far as industries that were really impacted with these questions, I think aerospace, as Alex said, was already, treading water as far as how do we be scrappy and be resilient to the impacts of the MAX situation. And of course, we've just had to get more innovative and scrappier in the impacts of COVID, and then of course of different rate reductions in demand for future aircraft. So I have many things that I can share, but want to leave space for our other panelists because I'm sure it's going to be a really interesting conversation about the different ways that we've all tried to mitigate this work. And I will say, I'm curious from our other panelists, how often have you flown during this time? I flew in over Memorial Day, had a great experience at the Port of Seattle. Sorry, Tony, I flew Alaska, but had a great experience with Alaska and saw due diligence being taken by every other airport employee as well. And I've had friends travel on aircraft as well. And we sort of have settled into a routine of you come back to Seattle and you get your COVID test swab within a couple of days after, and then you see if you were good to go. And so far, everyone's been healthy.
Thanks, Emily. I have not flown since March, and then normally I would be traveling to Pullman or to one of our campuses, once every 2 or 3 weeks. And so it's been really challenging. It's not because I don't want to fly. It's more that the university has really shut down and has discouraged in-person meetings. I did go to Pullman for one meeting and ended up driving because the flights in and out have been reduced so significantly. It wasn't convenient. But let's talk about the airlines. Tony, talk to us about how Delta is faring in this new environment.
Yeah, I think Alex, the real question is what has not been affected as opposed to what has been. It's like many companies in the travel industry, the airlines have been hit pretty hard. And what we originally saw was demand for air travel declining 93% year over year in the second quarter. And it's really the combination of fewer planes flying with fewer passengers on them and even lower fares to try to attract those that are interested in flying to go. And in the course of the last 5 months, airlines are still paying out refunds. It was in the billions and it has trickled down now into the millions. And all of this is on a sustained and relentless basis that's created sort of the perfect storm for all airlines. So all the majors needed cash to continue operations, and we received this through the CARES Act. And we also needed to take internal measures to reduce expenses, which was done through a combination of leave of absences as well as voluntary out packages. So since March, over 40,000 Delta employees have taken at least a month off without pay. And last month, we said goodbye to 17,000 of our colleagues who either took an early out package or a retirement package. These combined actions put our cash burn rate down to $27 million a day. And I know that sounds like an astounding amount of money for a lot of people, but that is versus $50 million a day early in the pandemic. And this puts us on a path towards break even by the end of the year. I think you're going to hear a lot from airlines trying to placate analysts about being in a break even position by the end of the year. So at the beginning of the pandemic, we really saw the passenger mix be first responders and repatriation. If you can believe it, we are still repatriating people back to China at this point, 5-6 months into this situation. Travel right now is primarily leisure focused and really visiting with family. Some of those visits are very unfortunate ones in terms of helping to put people to rest as a result of COVID. And we're seeing just the industry as it's coming back really being flipped on its head. Destinations like Vegas and Orlando are now lagging these open space destinations like Colorado and Alaska. I think some of the other really significant impacts is the need to meet international requirements. So China, for example, has introduced new medical verification requirements that need to be implemented effectively. And these were updated just yesterday. All US passport holders will be required to take a COVID test and get the results back 3 days prior to departure, but you need to also have that test verified by a Chinese embassy or consulate in order to be valid for boarding. And these requirements are not consistent by country. So as we're getting outside of our borders, we're really emphasizing the importance of trying to seek consistency in how we are operating and the operational requirements that we have in order to address this. And I would say finally, right now, we've really pivoted our efforts from consistently improving the physical experience of flying to focusing now on how we can make travelers feel more safe when they're flying.
Yeah, I want to get to that question of safety a little bit later in the discussion. Lance, what are you seeing at SeaTac on a daily basis these days?
Alex, thanks for having me. Just to start by answering Emily's question, yes, I've traveled recently. I traveled about two weeks ago. I was in Phoenix. I went to Miami twice, Dallas, Fort Worth, Kingston, Jamaica. And I must say, traveling at this point in time is a personal decision that each person has to make. I was very encouraged by how all the airports are operating, and all of these airports and airlines are taking the safety and health of passengers very serious. I was encouraged and I felt safe while I was traveling. So I took a COVID test before I traveled, and I self-quarantined when I came back. And I've been back almost 3 weeks now, so no symptoms. So I think it should be good. So just answer Emily's question. So Alex, what we're seeing as Tony said, I guess the most devastating period was about March, April, when we saw passenger numbers plummet to about 95% relative to the same time in 2019. And while we're seeing a recovery right now, we still forecast that we're going to be about 61% of what we were last year. That's what we're forecasting for the rest of the year. And for next year, we're looking at about a 30% decline. Now, every single tenant at this airport is impacted, not just the airlines, not just the airport itself, but everyone who operates at the airport, because all tenants here at the airport rely, whether directly or indirectly, on passenger traffic coming through the airport. As an example, over 2/3 of our airport concessionaires, dining and retail, were closed. So of the 89 units that we had, only about 14 were open during the worst time. We have seen a reverse where now 2/3 are now open. And that was both because of the lack of customer, but also because of the governor's stay-at-home order that we had at the time. So it was a very trying time. Now the port and the airport had taken decisive actions at that time. One of the things we realized is that in order to weather the storm, we had to find ways to assist our tenants. We had to find ways to protect our employees. And so some of the things that we did, we deferred rent, we deferred fees, minimum annual guarantees to our tenants. We renegotiated lease, we upfronted payments to some of the airlines to help them with cash flows. And we were incredibly grateful to the congressional delegation and other leaders in Washington, D.C. For including airports in the first coronavirus relief package. If you may recall, airports overall were allocated $10 billion, and this airport got $192 million, which went a long, long way, but it still was not enough to cover the $250 million deficit that we have. But it went a long way to allow us the opportunity, or afford us the opportunity to provide a relief and assistance to the tenants that we have here at our airport. One of the good things is that we are continuing with most of our large capital construction project. We think it's important for us as a major economic engine within this region to lead the recovery effort. We have a $22.5 billion impact on the industry through direct, indirect, and induced activity that takes place here at the airport. We account for over 150,000 jobs and more than 420 million in state and local taxes. So it's important that we lead the recovery, that we continue to facilitate and provide these, not just any jobs, but quality jobs, living wages jobs here at the airport, because during the pandemic, the worst thing to happen to our employees or tenants at the airport is to be out of a job. So we're glad to see a steady increase, especially up to Labor Day, where we actually peaked for the first time since the pandemic. Last week, yesterday, and this week, and day before yesterday, we actually had more than 20,000 passengers coming through our checkpoint. Now, typically at this time of the year, we'd have 60,000 to 70,000 people coming through the checkpoint. But relative to April of this year, when we only had 2,500 or 2,800 people coming through the checkpoint, that's a significant increase. As Tony said, we're watching to see what will happen for the rest of September, because typically there's a fall off because school reopens and leisure travel dips, but it usually is offset a little bit by business travel, and business travel is something that we're not seeing right now. Leisure travel is actually leading the recovery effort. And so we're watching what will happen in the rest of September. So again, it's important for us as a major economic engine for this region to try to lead the recovery effort by continuing some of these huge construction projects that we have, but also provide relief to our tenants whenever we can. So the stimulus package went a long, long way. We're trying to get additional dollars from the next package. It's not looking so good right now. We're not sure what's going to happen, but we're still keeping our fingers crossed and hope we'll get additional grants from the federal government.
Lance, briefly, have you lost any airline tenants at SeaTac?
Well,
they pulled out entirely.
There's airlines that pulled out prior, and there are airlines that keep rescheduling. We're not sure what's going to happen. I think the travel restrictions that's taking place overseas is really impacting what the airlines do. Fortunately, we have had several actually for international flights, including Delta, that have restarted, nothing near what we had last year or prior to the pandemic. So it's hopeful, and I think there's a lot of dependency is going to be on what happens with the 14-day quarantine. If you're going to travel somewhere, you're going to be quarantined for 14 days. That's going to impact whether you travel or not. And so we're watching that closely. But there are several airlines that have kind of put off restarting service here, but then we maybe have about 6 airlines that have restarted international service here as well. So that's very encouraging.
Yeah, absolutely. Very tricky, the international travel in this environment. So I think, maybe oversimplifying this thing, but the greatest thing that any of us can do to help with the recovery of the aviation industry is to start flying again. And to Tony's point earlier, convincing travelers that it is safe is, paramount in that. So, Tony, can you talk about what Delta has done to, one, improve safety, and then help communicate to your customers that it's in fact, in some ways, safer to be on a plane than other environments these days?
Yeah, it is, and I could leave it at that, but I'll explain a little bit more. I echo Lance to say that this was a great holiday weekend, maybe not for everybody that's at this meeting, but certainly for our industry. Over Labor Day, Friday was the busiest TSA passenger screening day since March, with over 970,000 people screened. And Monday was not far behind with 935,000. Now, that's still less than half of what we would like to see on a typical day. But again, think about in April, we were at only 90,000 a day for the entire country. We certainly would like to see corporate travel come back faster. And this is going to be driven by a very complex combination of the comfort of the corporate and safety and security people at large companies, the HR department, the legal department, and travel teams, and of course by the traveler themselves. And don't forget the family, significant others of travelers who are dead set against people getting on airplanes right now. These challenges cross multiple spectrums. As part of the process, Delta's really helping companies better understand the changes that we're making to ensure the health and safety of our customers and employees. And we've been conducting these curb to gate tours at 60 domestic and 10 international airports, where we really demonstrate what we're calling our new Delta Care standard. Now, every airline and hotel and car rental company has got their name. Ours is the Delta Care standard. I personally conducted over 20 of these tours at SeaTac with corporate customers, civic leaders, medical professionals, listening to their feedback and incorporating it into our thinking and action. And it's a good opportunity for me to thank Lance for his team at SeaTac, who have been great partners to ensure that the entire travel ribbon at the airport meets these new levels of safety and cleanliness. You know, Delta controls what happens on the plane and in the gatehouse or boarding area, but SeaTac staff is really responsible for shared areas like lobbies, lavatories, and restaurants. And we need really deep collaboration to ensure the safety for all passengers and employees at the airport. And we also need to that this is happening at the destination airports as well. That's why I mentioned these 60 domestic and 10 international, and we continue to expand that list daily. We've seen great opportunities also to work with rideshare companies and also hotels so that we can have the full 360 travel ribbon covered for people. So the real bottom line is people need to feel safe when they travel. In order to feel safe, they need to be educated, and the process that we're going through to help them with that is ongoing. I think while we see these green shoots coming through in the form of increased travel, some of that is being driven by refund and cancellation policy changes that would never have taken place in a pre-COVID environment. And I think people are really benefiting from these relaxed refund and cancellation policies to encourage them to consider to travel when they're ready to, and if their plans change, to not be too concerned about getting their money back.
Thanks, Lance. So can you talk about the airport environment and the travel ribbon? Is that the term you use, Tony?
Well, yeah, I didn't make that up.
Well, no, I know, but I hadn't heard that before. So, yeah, I mean, from your car or from your Uber to the airplane, there's a big segment of time in the middle that you're traveling to and from, and that's your purview, Lance. Can you talk about what steps you've taken to ensure health and safety of travelers?
Oh yeah. So one of the questions we'd asked ourselves is, what is it that we needed to do to restore the confidence of the passengers coming through the airport? because as Tony said, until passengers have a level of confidence, they won't travel. And so they need to be confident that the airport and the airline is doing everything in their power to make the travel experience safe and healthy. So if you come to the airport, you'll see a total difference. One of the things we're trying to do is to, as much as possible, make the entire journey touchless. We have achieved some of that, and in other areas, we're working on it. So we have started our Fly Healthy at SEA initiative, and you'll see, communications, etc. about that. So just some of the things. We have installed more than 250 hand sanitizer stations throughout the airport. And if you download our app can actually, you can use the app to locate exactly where they are, but they're usually all over the place, so it's not very hard to find them. We placed more than 5,000 signs and 4 decals to reinforce social distancing. We have more than 300 plastic protective barriers. I think Tony mentioned those as well, to have physical protection between passengers and people who work at the airlines. We have, we require face coverings or mask at the airport, and we have significantly increased how much we clean and disinfect. In fact, the TSA area, since for the last maybe 3-4 weeks, we used to clean it maybe 2-3 times per day. Now it's actually clean every single hour on the hour. That those points are clean. So it's a significant difference here at the airport in terms of going above and beyond to ensure that we make this environment as safe and as healthy as possible. And it's not just for the passengers. We also need to ensure that our employees and the people who do business and work at the airport, whether it's on the construction site, airport dining and retail, they also need to feel that the environment that they are working in is healthy and safe as well.
Liz, can you talk about enforcement and mask wearing in particular? How is the airport handling that?
So that's something that we grappled with in the beginning when we just start. How are we going to enforce this? Are we going to arrest people? Are we going to, going to charge someone with trespassing, blah, 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 because we actually could do that if we wanted. But our approach was different. And we decided that it's going to be more of let's inform and educate the people who are in the airport and are not wearing masks. And we also need to understand that there's some people who are not wearing masks, and there's medical reasons why they can't. So not every single person coming through the airport will wear a mask. And if you look at our policy, it takes into account that there are some people who may not be able to wear a mask because of medical or physical reasons as well. So education and information was the strategy that we embarked on, and it has worked. It has worked very well. We hand out flyers. We actually have our roving carts around the airport for people who don't have masks. We offer them a mask, and we're seeing over 93-94% compliance that's taking place in the airport, and that's very high. And even in my recent travels to Phoenix, to Miami, to Dallas, and to Kingston, Jamaica, the mask wearing utilization that I saw was extremely high. So I think industry-wide, the approach of not being draconian, but more being informing people and encouraging people to wear a mask has worked really well, not just at our airport, but other airports that I've traveled to recently over the U.S.
Great to hear. I wish you guys could come to my grocery store here in West Seattle and get people to cover their nose. That's the worst thing. Yeah. The people can't pull their mask over their nose, driving me absolutely bonkers. Tony, enforcement has been an issue for the airlines. Obviously, there's been some high-profile stories that have come across the news. How has Delta handled that topic, that challenge?
Yeah, we have a zero tolerance policy, and we've had that from the start. Many airlines have vacillated back and forth with their procedures, and most of them have escalated and followed our process. So far, Delta has banned 200 people from ever flying on Delta again for not adhering to our policy. One very known case is apparently the guy that killed bin Laden was flaunting the fact that he wasn't wearing a mask, and he will no longer be flying on Delta. We require people to wear their mask when they come up to the jetway. If for whatever reason they say they have a medical condition, we will pull them to the side, and we've actually contracted with a third-party medical company. They will have a conversation with a doctor in private. The doctor will ask them questions. Delta will then get the phone and it will be a yes or no. And it is simply based on medical science, whether this person will fly with us or not, or whether they need to wear a mask. So in addition to the requiring masks while people are flying, Delta has indicated that we're going to be blocking middle seats on our flights through the end of January. This is different than any other airline right now. We're the only ones that have said we're going to block middle seats through the holiday travel. And we really believe, not just us, but an MIT scientist, happy to share the data with anybody that wants to read through a report that is mostly alphanumeric. But the bottom line is blocking middle seats reduces the transmission of COVID by 78%. So we really do believe that this is a very good policy for us. And there are a number of things that most airlines that are members of the A4A, or Airlines for America, are doing to meet baseline standards. Most airlines will tell you that they're going well beyond those. And for the sake of time, I'll just leave it that we are certainly leading the pack when it comes to doing things that are beyond the call of what the A4A is asking for.
Great, thank you. I want to encourage our participants to submit questions in the Q&A box. We're having a really good discussion, I think, and there's more to talk about, but I'd love to get to weave in your questions and the areas that you're interested in. So again, use the Q&A box at the bottom. But Emily, mask wearing precautions are really important to your members as well as manufacturing resumed in the aerospace industry. Can you talk a little bit about the steps that your members have had to take to get back to a safe work environment?
Yeah, I think it's get back to a safe work environment and then contribute to a safe work environment for others in other industries. So again, first, we had this call in March for PPE and anything that you could give, face masks, scrubs, gloves in particular, that you could donate to your local, old folks home or local hospital or care center. Our aerospace companies did. They went to their shelves and cleaned out their PPE and then went, oh no, now I can't go into the clean room and continue making this component because I don't have PPE. And then there was a national, international PPE shortage. So aerospace companies had to get really scrappy really quickly. And those who were able to get into the PPE marketplace, which is one of the first areas of new market development I think we saw, those who were able to get into it are still doing very well. I think just about every aerospace company that had capacity has developed some type of mask or face shield or plastic shield and are continuing to innovate and make better ones and better ones. So we're meeting the market demand there. Also meeting the market demand for medical devices. I think we've long talked about the transferability of skills between aerospace and medical devices, and now it's really being put to the test. So again, companies who are able to get into the medical device marketplace, whether it's temporal thermometers, they're able to produce those and contribute to that supply chain while also purchasing and deploying that technology within their own spaces. So I had a leader of a company say, my goodness, I never thought I would think about how many door handles my employees touch since they get from the front door to wherever their workstation is. We're also hearing a lot of companies who had open concept working spaces and went through a big reorganization now have to rethink all of the open cubicles and the office spaces, private office spaces they took down. So there's some innovation and rethinking there. Everybody has been essential who has been manufacturing, especially if they were related to a defense contract. So they have deployed PPE and safe practices for a long time now. And I think have really led the state's development of regulations on how to keep other places safe. So aerospace manufacturers were, at their workstation throughout this time, and they've been able to transfer those skills as other places have opened up in different phases. And then of course, that's sort of on the low tech side of masks and face shields. And then we have our high tech sort of products that I don't think we are going to think of in the future. We're really going to take for granted in the future. And that is just how many chemical companies and coating companies are doing different types of touch barriers, and the only science I'm well versed in is political, so I won't pretend to go into the molecular science behind how it's working. But in the future, I think we're going to be far less sick just because everything has been coated with these innovative technologies that prevent us from picking up any type of germ, because they were implemented during this COVID time. We also have companies here who are doing test kits. We have companies like Teague, of course, who are figuring out airflow and air shields on airplanes. I think, Alex, you're dead on in saying the one thing that we can really do, the one market force we can really, encourage is safe travel and confident travel. And we were, of course, very excited to see the Boeing company's Confident Travel Initiative. I felt like and probably many of you feel like you're the one-man person saying, actually, the HEPA filters on the planes and the airflow and this and that are pretty safe, and countering the narrative that, oh yeah, I took a flight and now I got sick. Probably the grocery store, like you said, Alex, the Whole Foods person who's walking in just saying, oh, I just need, my matcha tea. And it's like, well, you can't come in without a mask. So reinstalling that confidence of air travel is just going to be the biggest thing for our industry, and will trickle down, especially in an aftermarket perspective, which we haven't had a chance to talk about. But then our companies have just been hard at work innovating in any other way they can to get into a different market sector, because commercial is just not returning anytime soon. So we have MRO companies in particular who are, working on projects that they never thought would be in their wheelhouse and are now seeing a lot of opportunity.
Really fascinating to watch these companies, aerospace suppliers, pivot to find new work, whether it's masks and face shields, which, as you said, were super simple. WSU is working with a manufacturer in Spokane, actually thanks to Emily and the AFA, with a state grant to help develop some sensors, in-mask sensors, working with Alltech there. So it's been fun to watch. And as you said, Emily, we've long talked about the transferability of aerospace manufacturing technology and skill to the medical device industry. And aerospace has always just been so busy that they haven't had the need to actually make that shift. And now we're being forced to do it. And so, a truly optimistic person might think we might be healthier when we come out of this. It's just going to be a long road as we go to get there. Technology development, everybody is using it these days, and I suspect both at the airport and on the airplanes, new technologies are being deployed to help with this issue. Lance, can you talk about what the airport is doing? I think I saw something on Twitter that our friend Eric might have posted about autonomous sweepers that are rolling through SeaTac these days.
Oh yeah, we are utilizing a lot of technology. Anytime you get into a crisis, the norm is to innovate your way out of a crisis, and technology is one of them. With regards to cleaning, the autonomous self-driving floor cleaners, we have, I think, six of them. So you'll see them actually driving through the airport at night cleaning. And what that does, it actually frees up our custodial services staff members to actually focus on high-touch areas that they actually have to clean. It uses AI technology, artificial intelligence technology, and digital maps of the airport in order to determine where to clean. We're also using for cleaning electrostatic sprayers, and that sprayers, it adds electrical charges to the cleaning solution. We're testing UV lighting cleaning as well. There are some pros and cons associated with that as well. On the back office side of the house with our airport dining and retail, they're using a technology called Path Spot hand scanners, and after you wash your hands, you actually put it under the scanner. It will tell you if your hand was washed effectively, if it still have any germs on it. So that's a really cool technology as well. We have portable escalator handrail bars to clean the escalator handrails, because that's a very high touch area. We have Up to Q, which is a proactive managed cleaning and maintenance for the frequency of the restrooms. You'll actually see the exact time that the restroom was last cleaned. There's a QR code that you can actually use now to use your phone to give us feedback on whether you think the restroom is clean enough. Prior to that, you'd have to touch the smiley face button, and nobody wants to touch anything anymore. So we now have a QR code. And coming soon, we have Casper, not the friendly ghost, for those of us might be dating myself, but Casper is a mobile system that removes pathogens from the air as well. And other technologies that we're looking at, facial recognition, which we had started looking at before, we're accelerating that. There are privacy issues and equity concerns that we have to take into consideration. We're looking at capacitive sense devices. Remember the old stylus, things that you have to touch, but you can use a pen, a stylus pen, to touch it rather than your hand. Voice recognition for things such as elevators, because nobody wants to touch elevator buttons anymore. We have near field communications and RFID for touchless backdrops that we're exploring, but we're using near field communication for parking and things such as Apple Pay. Temperature sensors is one of the things we're also looking at. There are airports in Japan and some certain places in the Asia and the Middle East that actually scans your temperature, especially when you're coming in on an international arrival flight. We're looking at that as well. We upgraded more than 270 touch-free paper towel dispensers. And we actually have a technology that tells us whether people are physically distancing in the airport or not. Ironically, we had implemented that not for that purpose, but we have adopted it for that purpose right now. And we're using QR codes for menus and apps so you can order without having to touch anything. And the one that we're also focusing on now, we had just completed recently a pilot or a proof of concept for temperature checks, because we just believe in a multi-layered approach, and temperature check was just one of the layers. But what we're also going to be focusing right now is on COVID testing or rapid testing, which we think is another layer that if we can successfully have rapid testing at the airport, then that would be a significant game changer. Rapid testing along with a vaccine or a vaccine, I think, will be a major game changer for the aviation industry. So those are just a few of the technologies that we have implemented and that we're exploring here at the airport.
Lots of things. Yeah, interesting. Tony, how about you? What's being deployed on the planes as far as new technologies?
Yeah, it's, Delta has a history of repurposing technology that is actually pretty ancient. We were the first to use RFID, radio frequency identifier, that is 50-year-old technology to track bags on our Delta app. And Lance mentioned electrostatic spraying. Many people don't know that this technology has got a 60-year history in things like agriculture, the automotive industry, and even the spray tanning industry, which Alex, I know secretly you love and adore, but for another time we could talk about that. It's now one of the key tools that we use on our airplanes to apply surface disinfectants, and we've seen a lot of companies talk about electrostatic spraying. Lance also mentioned touchless check-in. We would like to see a touch-free airport. Things like facial recognition for transactional purposes only are things that Lance knows that we are pushing very hard for as it pertains to customer identification. And we've made a lot of changes to our Fly Delta app so that customers can be kept up to date on what they can expect when they arrive at the airport. Other things that we've been doing is employee testing. We're the only airline right now that is testing every one of our customers, of our employees, to create a baseline to measure infection and transmission rates. And we've also partnered with CVS to do a rapid test so that every one of our pilots and flight attendants can be tested and have results back within 15 minutes before they actually get on the aircraft. That is great stuff. Our partnerships also with organizations like the Mayo Clinic and Lysol's parent company are really helping us figure out ways that we can continue to protect passengers and employees. And one of the first areas of focus is developing sort of breakthrough technologies for laboratories. If there's one place that customers really want to see cleaner, it's the restrooms. So these solutions to basically create a sterile environment after each use in the entire laboratory are the things of the future that we're working on. And because we have a division called Delta Flight Products, we can actually manufacture some of these things on our own. You know, all those plastic plexiglass screens Delta was one of the first airlines to have them up at every check-in because we actually manufactured them ourselves. We didn't have to get into the queue and wait along with everybody else, every other retailer that's trying to do this. So I think in the future, what you're going to see is true applications of blockchain technology. When we do an electrostatic spray of the plane, we want customers to be able to use a QR code to be able to determine when was it sprayed, who sprayed it, what was the solution mix that was utilized, and who did the auditing on this. All of these things are available, and it is a really interesting thought process to move forward with that. I think we've all become really good at Microsoft Teams, Cisco WebEx, and Zoom. I'm not sure that counts, Alex, but I'm giving you just a couple of examples of how we're using technology now in this current environment.
Certainly, all the different platforms for video conferencing we've all gotten better at that. Some people still have some work to do. Shifting gears a little bit, the other topic that is coming up in every conversation that I'm certainly having at the university and with my partners, my external partners, is social justice and diversity, equity, inclusion. And I know in all of your organizations, this is a topic that is coming up as well. I'm not sure who wants to start. Maybe we'll start with Lance. Can you talk about the port as a whole and what steps the port has taken to make sure that we are appropriately focused on issues of race in your organization?
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Yeah, so we've really put a significant effort into making sure that small and minority-owned businesses can compete for opportunities here at the airport. Whether it's for dining and retail concessions, or it's construction projects or janitorial contracts. Our 2019 diversity in contracting report shows that we have made some significant progress on this front. But of course, there's always still much more that we can do. The airport is also part of the South King County community, which is one of the most diverse areas in the entire state. And so we recognize our responsibility, of course, to our neighbors. A huge portion of the airport workforce is immigrants and people of color, and we work closely with organizations like the Airport Jobs to not only get these individuals into the workforce, but also to help them upgrade their skills for higher level opportunities. And in addition, we recently announced the first grant cycle of our South King County Fund. And this is focused on developing equity-based partnership and providing resources in historically underserved near airport communities. We have $1 million currently available to fund projects that are related in this area. And one of the things, Alex, that the coronavirus has brought out is that it has shown that there are communities that are disproportionately impacted by the coronavirus. And these disproportionalities existed prior to that. And so we're trying to ensure that we as the port invest in these areas to see if we can bring some level of equity to provide opportunities here at the port and at the airport for people who live in these areas.
The port has long been a leader in this space, so thank you for that, Lance. And please thank the commissioners for us. Tony, Delta has announced a pretty broad diversity initiative. I saw your CEO at Bastion talking a week or so ago about that, and I thought it was particularly interesting how he's committed, or the company is committed to full transparency in the diversity data. A lot of us can report great numbers when you aggregate all minority populations together, but if you pull out the African Americans or Blacks and indigenous peoples, the numbers don't look quite so rosy. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, our chief people officer has said, if your team looks like your cul-de-sac, you're not doing a really good job on diversity. It's something that I grapple with every day in our organization. But I am incredibly proud of Delta's very public stance on these issues, and that we have a globally recognized CEO who uses his voice to amplify our cause. through his social media postings, Ed Bastian's invited customers to help us bring our values to life and to better connect the world. I think that invitation for feedback is one of the key elements that is going to help us be successful in this area. And here are just a few of the things that we're doing. We've been hosting these digital town halls about racial justice for our employees to create a forum for open dialogue and be able to ask our CEO questions on the spot. We've had the honor of hosting people like Brian Stevenson. Many of you may know him as the social justice lawyer and activist, and brought other experts to speak about Black mental health and offering resources for navigating inequity within our existing system. Dr. Bernice King, the daughter of Martin Luther King, also recently spoke at one of these town halls, and it was truly inspiring. She said, you can't overcome something you're not willing to face. The fact that we can't change without understanding how we got here in the first place is just a very deeply personal exploration that I think many of us are going through, questioning our own beliefs about how we have behaved and the sort of biases that have been created, but not only by ourselves, but by the society that we live in. And we know that simply caring is not enough. We've got to turn these thoughts into action. And we shared publicly our action plan for addressing systemic racism. And I'll just give you 3 points from that I thought was particularly interesting. We are going to be increasing the percentage of Black leaders to better reflect the total population of our employee base. Again, going back to that cul-de-sac example. We're really taking this time to think about our talent strategy. You know, airlines are not in a position right now where we're hiring a whole bunch of people. So this is the perfect time to be thinking about how do we expand our recruitment efforts to include more historically Black colleges and universities. How do we require all the schools that we recruit from to have strong diversity and inclusion plans? And things like strengthening our corporate internship and MBA programs so that we have this super strong pipeline to increase opportunities for future Black professionals. And then supporting our Black business partners. You know, we have a lot of companies that we work with to supply Delta. So how do we generate wealth in the Black community by diversifying our supply chain while seeking diverse business partners for Delta to execute its strategy? And these things are just the beginning, but I'm really optimistic we're going to get this done. And that's really for 2 reasons. Delta has a senior level cross-divisional diversity, equity, and inclusion council to ensure that the goals that are embedded throughout our organization constantly being evaluated and that our metrics are being distributed to leaders like myself so we know where we are in this process. And secondly, Delta is a values-based company. It's really all of our responsibility as employees to be the strongest advocates for equity and justice. So all leaders are held accountable for our own performance in all aspects of both our business and our personal lives. In our airports, break rooms, on the ramp, in our hangars, on our planes, and in our cities, neighborhoods, and schools as well. So we remain committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion in the broadest sense, and really look forward to the opportunity to demonstrate that and be a thought leader and a leader for others in this area.
Yeah, thank you for that, Tony. It's a little bit I've read about Delta's initiative. It's super impressive. And grateful to you and the company for taking that on. And Emily, your membership is very diverse in terms of size. You have Boeing, and you have companies that have just a handful of employees. And how's the aerospace supply chain taking on this issue?
Yeah, I think what you said earlier about when our companies get busy and there's a lot of demand for work and a lot of revenue opportunity, the long-term or sometimes internal planning and strategy gets pushed because you're worried about making enough components. And for our large partners like the Boeing company, they've really been leaders in being very intentional and strategic about actionable diversity and inclusion numbers, but that hasn't necessarily trickled down into our supply chain companies, again, unless there was a very specific program or sometimes someone who was just particularly passionate about it. I also can't tell you the number of companies that are just now thinking about having a dedicated recruiter in addition to their HR team that gets you set up with healthcare, right? So being really intentional about how you are recruiting your applicants, not only then how you screen the applicants that come to your door. Part of that is just the robust role of our community and technical college system that we have in Washington, as well as our two, incredible public universities. As a Husky, great programs, love Washington State University, always have to balance my Coug plug as well. We held a job fair for the aerospace industry back in, my goodness, was it June? And a lot of graduates who were coming through the four-year programs had done 2 years of community and technical college sometime earlier in their education, oftentimes transitioning over to a four-year program. And part of that is just keeping our local talent here, but also we've made a lot of investments as a state into that system, into that pipeline, and we can't forget, especially as we look to balancing a deficit in our budget in our legislative session next year, the importance of our community and technical college system. Something that our companies have continued to say was that finding talent before was very difficult, and it's going to continue being very difficult. We just have a bit of a blip right now with this situation. Part of that is companies who have a little bit more downtime or wiggle room are really looking internally at their training and recruitment process and figuring out exactly why leadership or people closer to the top of management roles look like me or Alex or Tony, typically more like Tony and Alex. There's a saying in aerospace that it's pale, male, and stale. And, sorry, Alex, Tony called you out. You're maybe not as pale as others, but it's pale, male, and stale. And a lot of that is based on the inability for, great talent, hardworking talent to advance into those leadership roles for different biases. And so with different grants, whether they were federal or passed through at the county level, like what Snohomish County did, they are sending a lot of their workers into basically fundamental programs like technical English. Just figuring out how they can put them in a better position to get into those leadership positions so that they can continue to rise in the ranks. And then, board meetings and your community meetings with leadership don't look like a cul-de-sac, as you said. So really impressed with the amount of work that our large and small suppliers have been doing during this downturn in order to really set themselves up for success, whether it's developing new technology or developing new internal systems to get the talent and make some real changes when it comes to diversity and inclusion.
Thank you, Emily. Terry has better hair than or Tony has better hair than I do, I should say. So, let me just say we're running down on our time, but I did want to ask you each one more question. The last major inflection point for the aviation industry, I think, was September 11th, where we saw some dramatic changes that we in the way we fly and the way we travel. Everyone says that the world is not going to be the way it was when we get through the COVID-19 pandemic. And I'm curious, from your perspectives, what do you think those changes will be that stick with us? What are we doing? What are we learning and implementing now that is going to be part of the new normal when there is a vaccine and there is rapid testing and everyone feels safe to travel again? Do you all have ideas about what you think is going to stick around? Tony, maybe I'll start with you.
Yeah, I definitely think this concept of clean and safe is permanent. And it's so permanent at Delta that we've created an entire division around this. It's run by Mike Medeiros, who I know Lance knows. Mike had my job here in Seattle before, and Alex, maybe you knew him as well. The perfect guy to lead this initiative. And we're hiring up a staff to permanently staff an organization that is going to make clean and safe the ongoing standard. So just like you have completely forgotten about the fact that you have to take your shoes off at the airport based on 9/11, you're going to completely forget about the fact that this is a new level. And I think those airlines that are going to adhere to these standards, keeping customers safe and clean going forward, are the ones that are going to be successful here. Sorry, Alex, you're on mute.
Am I not still unmuted? No, I'm not. Okay, Lance, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, so ditto what Tony said. And in addition, I am convinced that touchless, we were going touchless before, it has been accelerated now. I think it's going to be expanded. I think our passengers traveling through the airport is going to expect to go through the entire process without touching everything, even in an elevator, voice recognition, whatever it takes. The expectation is going to be I should go through the entire journey without having to touch anything in a restroom, at a kiosk, whatever it is. I think also, especially during the recovery, we might see the creation of, it's like we'd have chief security officer or chief experience officer. We may very well have chief health officers. We lucked out here at this airport. When we hired, just before the pandemic, we hired our safety officer, and she's a registered nurse. she's a health expert. So we really lucked out in that area, and she's just a tremendous subject matter expert in the area of pandemic, and she's been just a wealth of knowledge and information and assistance to here at the port. But I think you may very well see positions being created. As Tony said, there are entire departments that are being created around health, and you may have, normally health is rolled up under safety in many of the aviation organizations. You may very well see a difference between health and safety, where health is a separate function and has a separate leadership in that area. That may happen as well. But I think touchless definitely will stick, and that will be the way to go.
And Emily, what's going to stick around for your members as we move forward?
So I will say, I don't want it to sound too rosy. It has been a very difficult year for aerospace companies, whether they had already manufactured a bunch of forward-thinking parts and are now sitting on that inventory, or they've seen contracts dry up. Thankfully, we're seeing airlines in particular start to have more RFQs out. But for those companies that are able to make it through, they are scrappy and innovative and collaborating in a way that hasn't been seen before. I think the difference between this and 9/11 is that I think there's going to be a lot more consolidation of companies, but then a lot of broken down, long-standing relationships where the guy you used to go to for your contract is no longer at that company. And now you have to figure out, okay, is that company even doing this anymore? How do I broaden my network and let new players into this dialogue and really collaborate? We've had to come up with really, rapidly developed and executed and deployed technologies. We're really excited about some of the work at the federal level, especially with the Space Development Agency. Folks are getting into space, folks are getting into medical device, and especially defense in a way they have never had before, just because all the eggs used to be in the commercial basket, and those eggs all broke, back in March, and the basket broke too. So we will see a completely different landscape when it comes to the diversity of the revenue streams for us, as well as the technology development and innovation that's going to come out. And I think we can't stop talking about how the region in Washington State is really leading on making everyone safer, more innovative, and will continue to be a technology giant in aerospace as it has been for a long time. Aerospace isn't going away. I think the way we just collaborate and have these happy accidents of developing a new idea that's the next big thing is right on the horizon.
Well, thank you, Emily. And thanks to all of our panelists. I hope that our audience didn't spend the hour like my dog apparently has by sleeping here in the background. But that's Emma. It's her 11th birthday today. So my kids are making her dog cake, I think, in the other room. So if you heard some banging around, that's what that was. But anyway, I appreciate all of your leadership in this really challenging time. It's industry, as I said at the beginning, that is so important for the economy of our region. And we are all looking forward to the day where that we can get back on an airplane and travel around our country and around the world using your organizations and your members. So Lee, do I need to do anything else, or is that it?
You're all set. We just want to thank again our sponsors. So that's Advanced Professionals Insurance and Benefit Solutions, Business Health Trust, and Bank of America. And thank you so much to the panel and to Alex for joining us to share your experiences and your expertise today.
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
Look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.